Okay, it is Birkie, week before the Birkie, 2023. This is Coach Tom Dvorak with Body Physics Endurance Coaching. I am going to do a little recap of or primer to things that are important for athletes I'm coaching, as well as those other people out there that kind of followed my level up and Birkie recap from last year. I know there's a handful of people following there. So a little bit about this race. We're about 10 days out. Some of the key things you want to do before a big event like this is you want to make sure that you're keeping your regular routine and you're shortening your schedule a little bit. So less volume and less reps, but you're still doing the intensity. What you're looking to do is shed some fatigue and allow your body to be ready to race. So I'm kind of following a template so that you guys can all see, and I make sure that I hit the highlights and then kind of talk a little bit more in detail on those things. My personal philosophy on race week is the event is great, but if you're taking the race fairly seriously, and you know that you're someone that really gets amped up and added energy by being around large crowds, then that's great. If that's draining for you, then save all that spirited celebration for after the race and the day after and the rest of spring. So, make sure that you're slowly increasing your sleep. You're making sure that you're eating very healthy. You're taking in slightly more carbs the last couple of days before the event. But let's stay on task here and let's talk about ski picking. Number one is the trail is, 51 or 55 kilometers. And, the start has man-made snow underneath. It's been heavily worked. It's transformed. The wide start actually ends up just like the power lines, where it can be a little bit more grabby and sharp crystals. And it doesn't react the same as once you turn off the power lines and get into the woods, where it holds in a little of the moisture and tends to be a little bit more bearing-like transformation, and it doesn't always hit those super cold temperatures and suck all the moisture out like you get that wind effect and that open area on the power lines, as well as around the Birkie start. So when you're picking skis, you've really got to think about where you're testing them. And so race week, there's a few opportunities, definitely around 00, but be careful about where you're testing at 00. If you're on the Cordy start in the wide open, you're again going to get a sampling of an area that maybe not exactly resembles the trail. So being in the woods around the lit loop makes sense. I tend to try to test the skis down near Mosquito Brook, and the houses in there have some grooming as well, so you can get a little bit of an idea on glide. They shut down the trail where you really aren't supposed to be skiing on it much, but there may be opportunities for you to get out and do a really short glide test in a couple of different areas. So think about the south end down at Mosquito Brook or Hatchery. Do the loops at Hatchery. Understand your 2 or 3 skis. We're looking for the same wax, and we're looking at grind comparisons. So you want to go ahead and just kind of mark a place, tuck, don't put any speed on them with your poles, and glide it out. If you're skating, you also want to get a feel for what that feels like when you're skating on it? Does it kind of take off? Is it greasy? Does the tips move left and right a little bit, or do you get a really good firm purchase? So pay attention to that. The trail has layer upon layer of ice and snow compact. It should set up really well. They'll work it over. On the classic side, I think you've got to probably be having some pretty good binder on your skis under your kick wax, and then realizing if the tracks are sharp and deep, that when they pull them up before downhills, it's better to step out off to the right rather than grind up over as it slopes, as that track slopes up. You don't want to scrape the bottom of your ski and wear out that kick wax. So stepping out to the side can preserve that longer into the race. And you want to think about the second half being south facing, and looks like it's going to be, typical Birkie. They'll say 8 to 10 degrees at the start. If it's a clear night the night before, you can guess that it's going to drop into the zeros and then warm up quickly throughout the day. So once you get to 00, from that point on, it's all south facing. Skis are going to run faster and faster. So more of a warm uni grind makes sense. So that's super important. Probably too much on those, but sample your skis around North End. Sample them around 00. Bodecker if you can get up there and they're allowing you to, and then somewhere around Mosquito Brook and Hatchery, and get an idea of where your skis are running. Keep track. You might see that a uni grind is running better in the southern part. So if you're holding back a little bit and you can ski efficiently for the first 10 or 15K, they might really speed up in the second half and save you minutes. On the hills, it's really important to find kind of a softer tip if you're in the lower, slower waves or the further back waves where, say, wave 2, 3, 4, 5. This year, probably a little less because it's going to be a pretty firm deck. There is supposed to be 3 to 6 inches coming on Thursday. That'll be worked in, groomed in with the cold temperatures, probably not a ton of powder on Saturday. Quarterlopet a little different. You definitely, if they've got new snow, you're going to be a little bit more careful with a little bit softer tip because the firmer tips, as you're climbing into the powder or sugar where everybody's ground, it digs in and slows you down opposed to bouncing across it and allowing you to float across. So I think the last thing is don't overthink it. Go ahead and test your skis. Rely on previous knowledge and make the best decision with what you know earlier in the week, and then go for it. I guess the other thing I'll say is I can't speak to the non-floral waxes, but similar brands, I'm sure Toco's version of the old Toco Blue tends to run really well for the whole race regardless. You can maybe put a little like a blue red underneath and cover it with blue, buff it out really good. The Star liquid waxes using the Roto Zip. Roto wool has been really phenomenal and lasting a number of K. So look at Zach Caldwell's site and follow along on how to do some of those things. Clothing. It's a bit colder at the start. You should be a little cold at the start. If you're warm at the start, you're overdressed. Pay attention to wind. If there's a fair amount of wind, make sure you got a windbreaker. Dermatone is absolutely a must on the face, all parts of your face. Don't be afraid to have a buff. Dry socks, if you're taking the buses and stuff like that, it's good to have a second pair of socks and you put them on just before the start, 10, 20 minutes before. You don't want to get your boots sweaty. that's how your feet get cold. So if you can have your feet dry and dry boots, a lot of times I will wear a backup pair of boots and socks. I'll go warm up, test my skis, come back, take them off in my car by the start, put on the new ones, everything's dry. I do that all the way through in the entire kit. And then I've got a backup kit basically ready to go. Equipment. Let's talk about checking your baskets, poles, and grips this week, making sure they're all serviceable. You got a couple of skis still. So let's go ahead and make sure that you get those taken care of. I take electrical tape and wrap it around the first 3 to 4 inches from my baskets up. That way, if somebody hits my pole tip, it's less likely to break. Another tip I've heard is that people will reinforce up even a little bit further with that clear 3M tape or packing tape, just to give one more layer of durability on their ski poles. That way there's less chance of them breaking. Check your hydration hoses and clips on your water bottle holders and stuff. Make sure that those are all good. And then I've got bike tubes for some gels. So if you follow down here in this picture, you can see I have actually a mountain bike tube. I've got 3 or 4 of them on this belt, and I can yank that out. That gives me 2 or 3 accessible. And then in the back of the belt, I have an extra 1 or 2, or you can tape them under the bib. But this makes it really easy to grab, tear off with your mouth. I tend to do that just before I come into the aid station so that I've finished my gel by the time I hit aid station. And then I can grab a cup or 2 at the front end or back end, and I can ski down the middle and avoid all the kick wax and all the gels and everything that can get on your skis and cause you turmoil with glide. We put a lot of expense into the glide. Let's not screw it up in the transitions or the water stops. So bicycle tube, black over that, does nothing to mess up your belt. And if you get a long enough, this is probably 2 or 3 inches. It can even bunch up a little bit, but I'll get 3 or 4 gels on there. And I think if I click on this and zoom in, you can see right here, I've got a gel on there. That's actually a Science and Sport Beta, so it's black gel right on the belt. You can't even see it for those that are even concerned about pictures and stuff like that. So something to think about. Plan your food for the days before. Super important to make sure that you're eating healthy when you're up north. You're not relying on somebody else's food. I tend to make all my food ahead of time. I'm doing breakfast burritos. I've got Greek yogurt, oatmeals. I'm adding a few more raisins for some extra iron and oxygen. I've got berries mixed into my oatmeal, antioxidants. I've got a couple of protein bars there for snacks. And dinners tend to be chicken and rice and stuff like that. Let's see, what else? Lots of hydration, trying to stay away from any beer. It affects your sleep. If you got to do any beer, do non-alcoholic, the Athletic Brewing or something like that, or save it for after the race. Make sure you're getting your feet up and you're not running around all day. Spend some extra time stretching and rolling. And then write out a timeline backwards on your race as to how your time hacks are. So, 20 minutes before, it's a gel. You're just outside the corrals. You're ready to go. 30 minutes, maybe you do your final pee stop if you know a place to do that. Hour and a half before, what are you doing with the warm-up? You're testing skis. If you're classic, it's probably almost 2 hours before, but you're still paying attention that it's going to get warmer and the track's going to be faster when people are skiing in it. So take that into consideration. You don't want to leave your winning skis in your bag because you tested at 0, and most of the race was 15 to 28. Figure out what time you're getting up, when you're eating, what you're doing the night before, and try to get that all figured out. Okay, pacing from the start, super important to dial it back. Really try to govern yourself. It doesn't matter who's winning the first 10K. Just settle in, try to conserve energy, and work yourself around people. If you're so pegged that you can't comfortably navigate, you are going to lose tons of time in transitions. You're going to be huffing over the top. You're not going to make smart choices. You can catch a tip. You can crash, stuff like that. So, we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute with carrying momentum and stuff. Another thing, don't step up the hills. Ski up the hills. Shift your weight. Get 2 to 3 inches of glide, shift back to the other side. Make sure that your skis are skiing uphill, not stepping. Short pulls, the steeper the hill, higher tempo, but you're looking up the hill. If you look down, your butt goes back, your weight goes back, you're fighting a deeper squat, much harder. So keep your skis moving, keep looking up the hill, remember to ski up the hill. Now let's go back to this paragraph or sentence on, if you dial back the intensity a tad, you can likely ski your transitions way better, less crashes, better lines, more often you can tuck, right? So what you want to be is lower zone 3 of a 5 zone, or mid to lower zone 2 in heart rate. And what you're going to do is you're working the whole course. It's a time trial. So if you're backing off just a little bit going up the hill, you can transition up and over and get going, and you don't bleed a lot of time. And coming into a hill, as you're going down the previous hill, you want to put an extra couple of pulls. You want to tuck, and then you want to time a couple of strong pulls going into the bottom third of the hill. I tend to recommend that skaters go with their weak side immediately in the V1 when they've got the most momentum for the first 5 to 7 pole plants. When they start to bog down, switch to your stronger side. You'll have a little more snap. If you do this, you can shorten your hills by a third to half, and you're not skiing up as much. So ski in the hills, carry momentum, make your hills shorter, super important. Fueling, hydration, you need to start this early. You do your gel 20 minutes before, your heart rate's been running high. You tend to have a little glycogen shortage there because of just the anxiety. Take that gel, top off the tanks, and then set your watches to remind you every 10 to 12 minutes. Constantly be working through the hydration. It's better to finish your bottles early than to carry them the whole time. And your body's better at absorbing when the heart rate's not pegged early on. The deeper you go, it's harder to absorb everything. So get in front of that so that you can run lower heart rates. You can keep the snap in your legs. You avoid the cramping, stuff like that. Testing skis race morning and before, I kind of covered that above. Understand the different parts of the trail when you're testing. I talked about that, and really looking at where you're going to ski. Remember, if you've got an open track, sometimes the tracks are faster, sometimes they're not. If you're not impeding a classic skier and they're even, the tracks in the skate lane, jump in the tracks every once in a while and rest those inner thighs and legs, get into a tuck, let your heart rate drop for a couple of seconds, and then come back out and skate over the next hill, especially on the second half, assuming the tracks are plenty fast and you're not impeding classic skiers. Also understand the piston bully goes down on one side and back on the other, so the center of the trail is going to be more compact. It's going to tend to run a little faster. So pay attention to those things, especially if you're a classic skier and the tracks are running slower, and you're running with the skaters. Understand what side of the trail the sun's hitting, who's using the trail. Does it curve to the right? Does it curve to the left? Pay attention to those things. Maybe jump out of the tracks just before you stall and herringbone up with a couple of hard herringbones, and then get transitioned back into double poling over the hill. Remember to look up the hills. Keep the weight shift small and glide. That goes for classic and skate. Always look up, hips up. Weak side first, I mentioned that. Plan out your water bottle stops, and think that through, and think about how much hydration you need, how much sodium, how much fuel, usually 250 to 400 calories an hour, depending upon who you are. That's a combination of both gels and liquids. So have a couple of extra gels there. Higher sodium late in the race, in case you're cramping. It's almost always from sodium. Race temps, pay attention to what the week looks like, and think about clear nights. It's going to be a little colder, so the night before you can kind of get your head around that. Maybe you need an extra layer. Maybe you need to take an extra layer off if it looks like it's warmer. Let's see. Rely on your experience from previous races. Go back and look at previous race reports that you've written, logs, stuff like that. Don't rely on the embellished memories of yesteryear, and bro science. Somebody telling you that something's going to work that you haven't tested and you don't know and you can't recreate. So really run it down the middle and you'll have a good race. Let's see, the week before, extra carbs, avoid big crowds. We're still dealing with these COVIDs and upper respiratories. There is no way you're going to perform well if you've got a cold. My advice is, if you've really got a cold, what you should do is reset your goals. The Birkie's about finishing as much as it is having a great race. You get your time based on the previous 3 years. You get wave starts. So if you do get a cold, trust me, I've done this. I've gone out with a cold, hammered through high point, had the chills, had to pull out, got back to the car, and like wave 4 was going, or 5. And I'd been racing an hour already, or whatever it was. There were still waves going out. And honestly, it didn't even cross my mind. But had I just taken a jacket and a backpack and gone easy, I was not death warmed over. I could have skied the race and just finished and got my bib and another year, opposed to having to pull the plug with great fitness and just trashing myself and getting really in trouble. So back off if you've got a bad cold, and think about just completing it and just change your perspective. Let's see. Raw vegetables. Avoid Subways and stuff like this where you can get E. coli a couple days before. Go more to the vegetables that are steamed, that are frozen, that you can mix in, make them like baby food, grind them up. Sweet potatoes are great. Making sure that you're eating a lot of the brown rices, stuff like that. Your body weight's going to go up a little bit. That's your body holding on to the water in the carbs, and you'll use it on race day. I guess that's about it. It was kind of a 25-minute, blitz here, but play it down the middle and try to do the little things, and you'll have a great race. The conditions look awesome. Remember that you can't hit a home run if you're not at the plate swinging. So do everything you can to set yourself up for success. Try not to undermine yourself by doing something that makes no sense. If you've got a backpack or something, Camelback, make sure that those are covered so they don't, the nozzles don't freeze. I'll wear a vest a lot of times, shove it down the vest, zip it up. It warms up when I'm climbing. I unzip it, I tuck, and I'm drinking on the downhill, and that'll get me through a good part of the race. I've actually got a vest that goes underneath my bib and underneath my race kit, and I cut a hole in it so the nozzle comes out, and then I try to keep it warm that way. So no new things on race day, and just make sure your equipment's serviceable. Start getting your skis prepped now. Get a good hard wax glide base, you know, and then you can do your final coats as you get close to the race. My guess is, looking at the forecast, knowing the trail, a uni grind is going to be better than a uni cold. On the Cordy, if you're classicing, you may want to hire camber. The waxless are running great. I ran skins at the North End Classic and was just, you know, around 28 to 34 degrees, and they were just rockets. I used liquid star wax. I put the yellow on and rotoed it in after it sat for a number of hours. And then I put the red minus 6 to minus 12 or something like that over the top. Rotoed that in really good with not the roto cork, but I should say the wool. Put on a really glazed sheen, and then I used the skin cleaners, and then let that dry, and then I put on the anti-ice, and then there's another product that you can get in a little bottle at like New Moon or Riverbrook that is supposed to speed them up a little bit. And honestly, they were plenty fast. So if you want to make it simple and you've got skins that are running pretty quick, go for it. There's a lot of climbing in the last half, and if you're slipping with regular wax, you're likely to ski as fast or faster, assuming that we've got a good hard track. So those are my tips. This is Coach Tom Dvorak from Body Physics Endurance Coaching. I wish you the best. And those that are my athletes, feel free to reach out on any of these questions. But I do have this, kind of written down so that you can kind of look at it, pause the screen, and I will post this to my YouTube channel.